This is episode 76 of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast, and I'm your host, John S. Today I'll be speaking with Michael R. from the Bleeding Deacons group in Brooklyn, New York. Michael and I will be discussing the lawsuit that AA World Services filed in May of this year to obtain possession of the original manuscript of the AA Big Book. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing very well, and yourself?
I am doing great. This is a very interesting topic that a lot of people might not know about. I wonder, would you like to give a little bit of background about this manuscript, the original manuscript of the Big Book, and how it's changed hands and how we got into this position where AA is actually going to file a lawsuit to hopefully obtain possession of it?
Yes, I will try to do my best based on what I have. And
Okay.
Before I start, first I want to say it's really an honor to be asked to join you on this podcast. And I went back and listened to a few of the previous ones you've done. I wasn't really familiar with the Beyond Belief podcast, and I don't do much podcasting. I seem to download them and then end up deleting them or never listening to them. But I was really fascinated by the various topics you covered. So I just want to give a thank you and a shout out and a plug to anybody who might be listening to go back and check out some of the previous topics. Really excellent job. So
super. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. So with that, I'm in AA just over 3 years. Okay. And I recently, about 2 years ago, actually, got asked to serve as a GSR for the Bleeding Deacons in North Brooklyn, and that's when I kind of got thrust into service. And then these things started coming my way. So to fast forward to when this issue, first appeared on my radar, even at all. I didn't know the background of the original manuscript prior to really the notice through mainstream media that this manuscript was about to go off at up to auction here in Manhattan, in New York, and was on display at a gallery somewhere in Midtown, I believe. And so people were organizing little AA field trips to go over and look at this, prized possession. And at about the exact same time, I want to say late May, early June, it appears that AA filed a lawsuit to prevent the manuscript from going to this auction because their statement, which I learned later, more recently I learned this, that because it was in New York, they had a chance to seize this opportunity. It was physically in New York. That's
interesting.
They've made that clear. That's been discussed outside of any legal documents publicly. So that was their little move there. And then what it appears now is I was going over some emails and some notes that I had from some of the meetings here at the General Service and at the district level, and various people who from the area have spoken about this. And we, I like to tell people that we sort of have not an inside track, but I have direct access to some of the people who serve on the board, our area delegate and the trustees, and obviously the GSO is here in New York City. And so sometimes information comes to us, maybe with one less filter in the way. So maybe not. Maybe it's just that I pay attention, or who knows how that works. So at some point, Barry L. was in possession of this. It was gifted to him from Lois Wilson.
Right.
That much is clear.
Right.
And apparently there was a letter written by Barry L. that he was going to donate this manuscript to the archives.
Yes.
And then somewhere along the way, it left his hands, ended up, I believe, auctioned previously twice or sold. It changed hands twice privately. And that's where some people don't either. I'm not sure if they're not telling us how that happened or if they don't know. The situation is where it is now. And people say, well, that doesn't matter. I'm not a law expert. So I don't know about how these things could be traced or if there's any point to it. So what has happened in the last few months, if I can kind of fast forward, is that some members of AA here in the New York area, as far as I know, and possibly elsewhere, have written a letter to they made a motion to the area, to Area 49, Southeast New York, to and I'm looking for the exact wording, to sort of block to withdraw from the lawsuit entirely, to just drop it. That was brought up at the area level and was voted down. So that motion never left the area.
Interesting.
Yes, that just overwhelmingly was stopped.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Then they sort of organized their group secretly through a Facebook group of all places. And so that's why I don't know who maybe from other parts of the country got involved. And what they are seeking, and I'm trying to look for their exact wording here, is to censure the AA World Service Board of Directors for entering into controversy and attempting to obtain the manuscript, and also to remove some of the AA World Service Board of Directors, and possibly it's I don't know how this is worded, the GSO office.
Wow.
So I'm not sure if that's, remove the entire board or some of the directors. And this note that I have here goes on further to say that Article 4 of the General Service Conference Charter states that the conference can reorganize the board and fire them. The conference can, which is coming up in the spring as it does every year.
Oh, wow.
75% vote must be in favor of a censure to reorganize or to censure or reorganize the board. So where that stands is that motion being pushed forward? I don't have a direct answer because I am not in that Facebook group. I was not invited to it, and I can't seem to contact any of the people. Okay. And then lastly, just a few weeks ago, our senior delegate, John W., he wrote a letter, a little article published in our, I guess it's monthly, semi-monthly. It's called The Link. It's the General Service newsletter for Southeast New York, Area 49. And interestingly enough, there's no link to this article on the website. But I have the physical copy in front of me. Okay. And he basically says that that's all that AA is saying publicly, that they have the right under the service manual and the concepts to not disclose everything publicly if they don't want to, and that it's sort of the right of decision that members are granted at any level of service beyond the group level, and that this issue is coming up in the courts, and it's any day now. I want to say it's December 13th, where the next hearing that had been postponed will come to happen. And then the final issue is that they won't publicly disclose how much money has been spent so far.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And that was one of the sticky points with the one member of this Facebook group who spoke out a little bit but didn't go on record. He's heard it's somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000.
Oh, my God.
And there was sort of a nod in agreement, like, it could be somewhere around there, yes, but he wasn't disclosing that exact amount. Our delegate wasn't. So does that sort of catch us up to speed a little bit?
Yes, that does help out. I did a little bit of just cursory work on this, so I was kind of like trying to follow how this document had changed hands. So we know that Bill Wilson owned it up until the time that he died in 1971, and then Lois Wilson had it and then gifted it to Barry Leach in January 1 of 1978. And Barry Leach, for those who don't know, is the author of Living Sober. And from what I understand, the background on that might be that when Barry wrote Living Sober, he was wanting to get royalties for it, but he wasn't given the royalties for it. And he helped Lois Wilson write her autobiography, and they were very good friends. So I think that Lois might have gifted that to Barry out of appreciation for all of his help and service, to AA. So he gifted it to him. Now Barry, like a year later, in April of 1979, provides this notarized letter to AA World Services where he gifts this to them upon his death. But he stipulates that he will retain possession of it until he dies, and that this gift cannot be made public until after his death. Okay? So now he dies in 1985. And apparently AA World Services forgets that they have this. I don't know how they do this. It's crazy, but they forget. Maybe it's because they change,
They rotate out.
Yeah, so they forget that they even have this thing. So a lot of time passes by. So then in June of 2004, somebody purchases it at auction for $1.5 million. Okay. Now, the person who sold it is anonymous. He's an AA member by the name of Joseph B. And how he got it, I don't know. I could not find anything in my research. But what it said is that he was an AA member whose aunt happened to know Bill Wilson. And so he somehow came upon this, he probably somehow got it from maybe Barry's estate. I don't know. So anyway, he sold it to Schenck in 2004. Schenck auctioned it in 2007, and this time it only sold for $992,000. And it was purchased by Ken Roberts, who's the current owner. Roberts ended up going into business with Hazelden, who he allowed to just sell copies of it. So I own the book. It's a big, huge book. It's really kind of nice. It's kind of expensive though too, although I think it's on sale now. But it's like you can see the multilith with all the corrections and everything. So anyway, he probably made some good money off of that. So now he decided that he was going to put it up for auction. And what I found interesting was he told AA World Services that he was going to sell it before he put it up for auction. So like, I guess it was in April of this year, he let them know that he intended to sell it. And then in May of this year, that's when AA World Services filed suit. And then one other interesting thing about this timeline, AA found the gifting document in September of 2007. So they knew they had, and I've seen the document. We'll link to it on the podcast write-up where you can actually go to the Supreme Court of New York and you can see all these documents. But they've had this since September 2007. And I was kind of wondering, well, why didn't they do anything? And now your explanation kind of makes sense. Maybe they were waiting for it to be in New York, right?
To land here.
Interesting. So now, here's from our area, what happened. I'm in Missouri. Our new delegate came back from the conference and she did something that was kind of odd. She wanted to get the sense of the assembly of what we thought if AA should pursue this lawsuit. And nobody had really any information at all, but everybody said, oh yeah, absolutely, let's do it. Well, past delegates got up and they were upset. They said, no, first of all, we're upset that AA World Services didn't tell us about anything about this. It's going to cost a lot of money to pursue this lawsuit. And what are we going to do with it? Put it in a cabinet somewhere? It detracts from our primary purpose. And then also, we're not doing so great financially anyway. And that's all I know there.
So this is, yes, it's like I said, one of the things that the delegate did mention here was that it sort of is on hold no matter what happens. They are committed to getting to this point of December 13th, where the hearing will be held here. I believe it's in New York, and I even believe they have posted publicly, but sort of it's hidden somewhere which courtroom it's going to be in case anyone from the area wants to show up. I don't know what effect that will have, if any. I don't think they're going to be calling for any comments from the floor like at a raucous business meeting or anything like that. But I know that has been mentioned, that some people are going to, again, field trip down there to see what happens. But the delegate just, he emphasized that there's not much that can be done to go go backwards, and that would be sort of a waste of time and money. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that while this one group of AA members that have assembled on Facebook to form their coalition that might be attempting to either censure or reorganize the board, that's very interesting. A lot of members, especially some with very little time in AA, have expressed concern, on the lines of, wow, if they're spending $150,000, what does that mean to, publishing and, putting out materials and, carrying the message to the alcoholic, that primary purpose type of thing. And the answer that we got back as GSRs was that there's already a legal fund that's established in the it's in the charter of AA, and it's in there. The word they use, it's in their purview to do this, and it doesn't affect any other area of AA. Now, that doesn't make complete sense to me, because I know that if you take money out of something that could be spent elsewhere, but maybe it's budgeted as such, and I'm not an expert on that. And again, I only have a couple of years here in general service as a GSR, and a lot of it is a steep learning curve, and we're reminded, just show up at the meetings, just show up and listen, just ask questions, and then maybe by the time you're finished with your term, you'll know what you were doing.
Well, I took a look at our financial position by reading the financial documents that were disclosed after the last General Service Conference, and this is what I know. At the end of 2016, AA had assets totaling $28,481,000, liabilities of $15,736,000. So our net assets was $12,744,000. Now, we lost money in 2016. And at the end of 2015, our cash was $8,459,000. At the end of 2016, our cash was $5,029,000. So we lost $3.5 million from 2015 to 2016. So that's not good. I was looking at the budget for 2017, and there's a budgeted amount. I was trying to see, okay, what do they budget for like legal expenses and so forth? And there wasn't anything in the budget specifically for legal expenses, but there was something for professional fees. And the 2017 budget for professional fees was $168,000, which was pretty much what they were running in previous years. But the actual amount that they paid out in 2016 was $200,000. So, and I guess that could be, who knows what that is for, the professional fees. I guess that could be for accountants, for lawyers. I know they have to defend lawsuits that they get from time to time. So, this lawsuit would not be part of that budget, I would not think. And this would blow that budget. They're expecting, based upon this budget, they're expecting to have a positive income of $397,000. So if they're going to spend $100,000 on a lawsuit, that's going to really eat into what we're expecting for a profit.
It would appear so. Yes, I don't know. I'm not a financial expert. I don't know if they have, maybe made an adjusted budget. But this all happened after the conference last year. So there's no way they could have, factored this in any way. So, again, that's something I don't know anything about. Just that it does seem like a very large number, to tackle an issue that, it's one of those things where, well, isn't this just going to end up like let the cards fall where they may kind of thing? And, and the other thing that's interesting, and some people ask this question, and they pulled me aside and said, "Well, if this manuscript is available publicly already, you can buy it from Hazelden."
Right.
I've seen photocopies of almost every page in various, posts and these groups or in emails. They're like, "Why do we have to have it so badly?" And I said, "That's a question I can't answer." I know that some people are, those real they get excited about the history of AA and they're very passionate about it. I've heard the phrase, someone said they stood there and viewed the manuscript and had goosebumps. I don't know that would be my experience, and again, I only have 3 years sober and I didn't really know anything at all about AA prior to coming in, other than it was a group where people met and I guess they stopped drinking, or I thought maybe they taught me how to drink safely. I really did not know much about it. I did nobody that I knew in my family or close circle of friends was in it. So all the history to me, as far as I know, they invented AA in 2014. Right. When I walked in, that's my take on it. So this is all new to me, wow. And it is fascinating. I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I like seeing how the various history comes out of New York, and I have actually some ties to the Akron area as well, and I had visited Akron many, many times and didn't know a thing about it.
Wow.
So I find that interesting. And so I don't think I'm going to get goosebumps by viewing a manuscript. No. I just, I just don't get that. But apparently that's sort of, I think that there's an emotional factor involved with some of the people. And I would hate to see their judgment or their decisions clouded by emotion, because I know that as an alcoholic, I know how I think. And sometimes my emotions get the best of me and I make decisions that aren't really in the best interest of myself or others. And applying that at the group level, I would hate to see people get all up in arms and divided. But things like this have happened before, apparently, and AA has survived.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it's like almost any family where there's an inheritance or something, there's always seems to be a fight and a lawsuit over it, and that's kind of this thing here. That's like, after a while, it's like you have to think, I'm not going to put lawyers down, but when you get into a lawsuit, the lawyers are going to, I think they're going to they make money off of the time that they spend doing it, but they're going to come to a point where they're going to say, okay, my client now needs to do a cost benefit analysis. You've already spent X amount of money. This is how much more money you're going to spend. And this is your chance of success. And I guess that at that point, you've already spent money, and that's what happens is the lawyer is going to already recover all of their money and then say, do you want to proceed or not? And then it's up to the client. But I think in most cases, most lawsuits settle because of the cost involved with filing the suit. But in this case, if AA settled, we would lose because, I mean,
Technically.
what we're trying to do is gain possession. So what kind of a settlement could we possibly get?
That's a great question, and that's one thing that I heard echoed is like, well, if we have this letter that states that it's legally ours, and then we settle, yeah, we lose.
Right.
And I said, then it goes away. But
we spent money already.
We spent money already. And the other thing, I just actually glanced down at this article again. I have the physical copy. I don't have the link to it. Otherwise, I would send it to you. I'm going to ask if I can get that from the area. Is that they do? He cites the concepts and states that the authority granted in Concept 6 gives great latitude. This is a quote. I'm going to read this directly. Concept 6 that gives great latitude to the board to act in what they deem is in the best interest of the fellowship. And then it goes on, as they seek to reclaim a unique historic document that, according to Barry's very specific instructions, rightfully belongs in the archive. So they're acting on or they're stating that this is written into our concepts, into our service manual, into our charter. This is part of what we are authorized to do.
That's interesting. So is this going to be brought up at the General Service Conference this April?
Well, it's certainly, if this is my take. This is what I left the assembly with. If the issue is not resolved on December 13th or shortly thereafter, this group will seek to formally address the General Service Conference. Okay. So yes. So in other words, if this hasn't gone away and been resolved and is still dragging on, this group is dead set on bringing their move to either censure or reorganize the board to the conference, and they are also the focus of the core of the group, I believe, is in the New York area. So again, they have some kind of a little bit of access and knowledge that maybe somebody who's in the outskirts of Maine, who just goes to a once a week meeting and doesn't really have contact with their area delegates, et cetera. So these people are definitely aggressive about it and are stating we will continue through to this. So there's no definitive answer on that because it could go away.
It could be then that maybe some of the people in that group might be participants in the General Service Conference.
There's a very good chance that is the case. And again, I couldn't really find. They said that one of the gentlemen from this secret group of Facebook members and people who are also contacting him in person or via phone, email chains, whatever. He was there at the area assembly. He is either a GSR or a district member from one of the from one of the groups or districts in Southeast New York, which is, I want to say 9 counties total, which the 5 boroughs of New York City. It's Long Island, it's Westchester and Putnam counties in upstate, just in the lower Hudson Valley there. So it's a pretty big region of, thousands of groups. Mm-hmm. But I believe this one gentleman, but I couldn't contact him. I cannot get his information. And I think that's how we began this conversation between the two of us, is that I posted, does anybody here know about this that might be involved? Because I'm thinking maybe some Facebook people are in other groups also. And that's how we met on Facebook. Yeah. And, no one can point me to this. It's a secret group. That means I can't search for it. And unless I know somebody who's in it or get invited to it, I won't be able to find it.
Yeah. And I imagine they're trying to keep very, very much under the radar too.
I think so. I think so. Because we all know how that can be too. It could be infiltrated. They could receive bad information. But the question you asked is, it would be interesting to find out if one of these people are really involved, either at the area level or possibly a delegate even, or somebody in the conference on the board. Maybe, who knows? Very likely. Very likely. Think
because I don't know how they could get to the General Service Conference and do anything if they weren't actually there. Because what they do at the General Service Conference is pretty tightly held. It's pretty secretive until they release their report to us.
Yes, that wasn't made clear because that wasn't he didn't get up and make any sort of announcement. The only motion that was made was at the previous area assembly back in September, when the motion was simply to formally ask AA to drop the lawsuit, and that was overwhelmingly shot down. Now, on a side note, at the same assembly back in the area assembly back in November, just a couple weeks ago, our District 404 in North Brooklyn, introduced the motion to ask AA General Service Office, to ask the conference to support, that our area supports the publication of the pamphlet for the agnostic and atheist members.
Right.
As you know, in some of the other areas, they've asked specifically for the God Word,
right.
the UK pamphlet. But our district in North Brooklyn, with the tireless dedication and effort from your friend Ed W.,
yeah.
largely, who's a good friend of mine also, did bring that motion. And it's the first motion that Area 49 has brought to the General Service Conference in 10 years, I think they said.
Wow.
Like we haven't made any suggestions. So, so our delegate is going to bring that to the conference. So I know
cool.
there is that route. So we still have a couple of months. So maybe this little group is going to organize, and maybe they will bring a more specific, tailored motion. And hopefully that does. I mean, I would love to see that come up, just to be in the room while that discussion goes on.
I like that motion that you guys have from New York of creating our own pamphlet rather than adopting the God Word pamphlet.
Yes.
I think that so many people were just saying, oh, it's going to be easy just to go ahead and adopt this. But I think that we could probably come up with a better one, and anyway,
that gives them the leeway. Our motion is general enough. It's not so specific to just adopt the God Word pamphlet that it gives them the leeway to, assuming I'm confident they're going to pass this.
Yes.
I really am. And I believe it's going to be brought back, and everyone's going to be on board with it to the tune of our area. I want to say almost 70% were in favor, 75% were in favor, and it passed on the first motion. And there was a little bit of discussion for, the dissenting opinion gets to speak, but nobody changed their votes. So I think we're going to get an idea that happens. And then obviously we know the process. This, again, new to me, but anyone who's been in AA a while knows that it could take years and years for them to actually produce something. But our motion combined with the other areas will, I think, indicate to the conference that the people are in favor of this, the members are in favor of this.
Now, so I know that we're all pretty much, all of us agnostics, atheists are pretty much overwhelmingly in support of that pamphlet. How are the groups, the membership, how do they feel about this lawsuit?
Well, when it was brought up at the last business meeting for the Bleeding Deacons, is the name of the group that I'm the GSR of, the Bleeding Deacons in North Brooklyn, which is a great name because it's a lot of people with relatively short-term sobriety, but they're active, and it's a 7-day-a-week meeting, 365 days a year. It's a pretty healthy meeting, and they were just curious about the money. They don't know much about the history. None of them really would even know Barry Leach. They wouldn't know anything about Lois Wilson gifting the manuscript. So from my group, one member came to me and said something about he had caught wind of this move to reorganize or censure. That's the first I ever heard of it, was from actually one of our group members. But he doesn't know who is behind it either. So I'm hearing mixed messages. I'm hearing people that are in favor of trying to claim it because it's history and it's ours. And I hear a lot of people who with long-term sobriety saying, you know what? Just you have to let go. They let go of the copyrighted logo some decades ago.
That's right.
It's already out there. Why are we fighting? We shouldn't be brought into public controversy. It's a tradition.
Yep.
So I think that's my take on it, and from what I'm hearing, is that's people are more in favor of simply letting it go away.
Yeah, that's the position I've come to, and it didn't take me long to get there. When our delegate first brought up the vote, we overwhelmingly, and I raised my hand. Yes, emotionally, I wanted to have AA to own that thing. But then when the past delegates got up to speak, and they started talking about, wait a second, this is going to cost a lot of money, and for what purpose? And we were already losing money, so that kind of changed my mind to think, just let it go. It's not worth it. Like you say, there's a book. I have a book right here. I can look at it anytime I want to. So that's where I feel. I think that maybe some people feel that it's and it goes not necessarily in violation of the traditions, but that it goes against the spirit of AA and that people are profiting off of it. That's I think that rubs people the wrong way. I think that somebody is going to personally profit off the work of. But again, it's happened. It's past. Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Well, very interesting. If you could get that document to me, that would be very interesting if they would allow us. I don't know if they would allow us to post it or not.
To link the letter that the delegate put in the CNE. Yes, I will try and get that. Apparently, I can have somebody email that to me because this is available to any AA member. We hand this out at meetings. It sits next to the literature rack. This is public. This is our
Okay.
monthly newsletter. So yes, I can get you that, definitely.
That'd be cool. I'll put that in there, and then some background information. So yeah, this is great, and I'm so happy for you, Michael, to get involved in general service, so new to AA like this. How do you feel about it? You enjoying it?
Well, I am. And again, I have to give a shout out to Ed W. I was at a meeting on, I think, a Friday night about 2 years ago, and I had a little over a year sober. And Ed barely knew me. And he walks up and he goes, "Hey, would you mind going to this meeting tomorrow morning?" This actually was an intergroup meeting for the New York Intergroup. I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Hey, you sit back there. You just tell them you're from the Bleeding Deacons, and they make some announcements. Then you bring the meeting. You bring it back. You'll be like the interim or temporary delegate." And I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." He goes, "Yeah." I don't know if he just tuned into the fact that I'm the kind of person that sort of does get a kick out of those things. And so I went to that meeting, and a lot of it was very confusing. It was for the intergroup. But the way that the Bleeding Deacons does it is that means you're the alternate GSR as well. So a month later, when the elections came up, I was nominated to become the alternate GSR and take it on as a commitment. Yep. And then our GSR stepped down a short while later. We took a vote, and I became the GSR. And I have to say, it's been fun. It's been challenging. It's given me something to kind of look forward to. I really get a kick out of it. I can see it's not for everybody. Right. But for me, it's very rewarding. I make these announcements sometimes during the seventh tradition breaks at the meetings, and I make announcements about what's going on in the district or the area, and I feel like some people aren't even paying attention. But as Ed W. says, his service keeps you sober. He loves saying that, and I really enjoy it. And I encourage anybody who wants to learn more about the workings of AA and how all this stuff comes to be. You can just go to any one of the district meetings or the area meetings. Any AA member can attend. They're open to all members of AA. You don't have to be an officer of the group or anything. So I encourage anybody listening to find out if you have a GSR, and you can just show up and maybe become one. Ask your group, can I become a GSR, and get involved. And they say that, what is that? Be the change you want to happen, or whatever that saying goes.
If you want to make some change in AA, that's the only way you're going to do it.
That was the motivation and how we're getting people involved in our district that brought this last motion, and it affected Brooklyn. We have a county level here in New York as well, an extra layer of I would seek to eliminate that and just go from the district to the area. But again, I can't change AA overnight. But yes, long story short is I love it, and it's been rewarding. I can see where people would burn out on it. My term will be up at I still have one more year as GSR. So, I love it.
Well, thank you very much for participating in this podcast. I think this will be a very interesting one because a lot of people don't know about this, and this might be the first time that they learn about it. So, very cool.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you very much for having me, and great job. I really enjoyed listening to it. If I can figure out how I can get my device to download all the episodes, I'm going to go back and listen to every single one of them. But I know I can just pull them up and hit play. It really is simple, and they're excellent. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, you have a good one, Mike.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for another episode. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your support. If you have an idea for a podcast episode, please send me an email at john@aabeyondbelief.org. Or if you would like to appear on the podcast, again, send me an email. I'm at john@aabeyondbelief.org.